Hello guys, welcome to DB Talk channel. Today's video, I'm going to go through how to manage PgBouncer. And if you to give a little bit background about the PgBouncer. So what is a PgBouncer? PgBouncer is a utility that manages connection pooling for PostgreSQL. Because PostgreSQL is natively not really good when handling database connections, because every time when you connect to Postgres database, it will fork the Postgres process, which will basically consume about a 2 MB of memory for each connection. And so that the server, the resources will be consumed for each and every connection. Because of that, the Postgres community has created this tool called PgBouncer, which maintains a pool of connections for each database and user combination. So PgBouncer either creates a new database connection for a client or reuses an existing connection which is already established for the database server. So when that client disconnects, the PgBouncer returns the connection to the pool for reuse. That's how the PgBouncer basically works. So I have created this, there's a the blog post some time back. So you can just have a look at it on how to install and set up the basic configuration of PgBouncer so that you can start with PgBouncer for the connection pooling for PostgreSQL servers. So this is the official site, the community site for PgBouncer, which basically uh, list the releases, recent releases of PgBouncer. The latest release and at the recording, at the time of recording this video, is 1.15 PgBouncer version. So you can have a look at it for some, the enhancements, whatever the features introduced in this PgBouncer utility. And this is the blog post that I created some time back on how to set up PgBouncer. So you can just go through this and get started with PgBouncer. So the link I have given below in this video description. So you can just refer to that. Once you install the PgBouncer, the main configuration file, you can find it here, etc folder, and there's a subfolder called PgBouncer. So there you have this PgBouncer.ini file, which is the main configuration file of PgBouncer, and you can just have a look at it, the configuration. So it has so many configurations, so you can just go through it. So in my blog post, I have given what are the configuration that I changed, the minimum required configuration. And there's a custom, there's a feature that you can add any custom configuration file. So in my case, I always prefer to, not to edit this main configuration file. So instead, I use a custom file which references from this main pgbouncer.ini file, so that when the pgbouncer starts, finally it will go through apply the settings of this custom file as well. So you can see this custom file has the database section, which basically explains what are the databases that you want to connect through the PgBouncer. And this is the actual server port. In this case, I'm using the DB version of Postgres, which is the port is basically 5444. and then you can mention some additional parameters like pool size, pool mode. The So you have three different pool mode that you can select. And the other parameters on the PgBouncer section, the listen address, listen port. This is the PgBouncer default port 6432, and max client connection, auth file, and this is the authentication file which basically gives the users and also their encrypted password. Uh, that is all I explain in my blog, how to create that and how to create the contents. And there's this admin users, which is very important. So if you want to manage this PgBouncer, or if you want to connect to the admin console of PgBouncer, so you have something called admin users, where you can specify a Postgres username here, which is basically which has admin rights. Maybe you can add comma separated usernames here. I haven't tried that. I think that is something you can do if you have multiple admin users. So right now I have only one user. So this is important. If you want to connect, then only you can connect to the admin console of PgBouncer. And this is another setting. So you can go through the entire list of the attributes of PgBouncer.ini file in the documentation section of the site pgbouncer.org, which I mentioned earlier. So this basically documents all the attributes, of PgBouncer.ini that you can configure. So remember the pool mode, which I mentioned earlier. So specifies when a server connection can be reused by other clients. So by default, the pool mode is session. So in my previous example, I changed that to transaction. So there are certain situations that you want to, carefully fine tune these parameters of PgBouncer. So while you are doing, maybe performance testing of your application through PgBouncer. So there are lots of configuration changes that you probably need to fine tune. Another popular connection attribute is max client connection, which you also need to configure from PgBouncer.ini file. So if you go to this usage section of this documentation, pgbouncer.org site, it also gives you the quick start guide of how to, configure PgBouncer. And so this is a quick start section. So these are the minimum, the configuration changes that you need to do in pgbouncer.ini file or the custom configuration file. And here is the admin user. And so in order to manage PgBouncer by connecting to the special administration database called PgBouncer, actually this PgBouncer is a virtual database. So you can connect to the PgBouncer and you can see this database, and within that prompt you can actually issue certain commands related to admin. So administration purposes, like reload if you do some configuration changes to ini file. So you can always connect to this and use reload in order to get those changes into effect. And there are certain administration commands that I'm going to show you. That's the whole purpose of this demo. So for example, show stats commands gives you the information about the connection statistics established to the PgBouncer, Postgres database via PgBouncer, and show stats totals, shows totals show servers, something like that. I'm just going to give you some sample output of this few of these commands. So let's try to establish a connection to the PgBouncer. So you can use the same command line tool which you can connect to the PostgreSQL, which is pSQL command line tool. And there you specify the username. So this username has to be the username mentioned in that admin users attribute of PgBouncer configuration file. So this user has to present in that configuration file, and also the user credentials has to be there in the user's authentication file. And here you have to mention the database name, which is the PgBouncer. Again, this is a virtual database. There's no database called PgBounce in if you actually connect to your server. Which is different here is, when compared to establishing normal connection to the server, here you need to specify the port, basically the PgBounce port. This is also the port which you have mentioned in the PgBouncer configuration file. So the same port you have to use here. And if you enter, you have to provide the password for the username. In this case, Susantabi. And so this is the command prompt. This is basically the admin console of PgBouncer, where you can, issue all the commands that I showed you earlier, like show databases, something like that. So you can see all the databases with all these information, pool mode, max connection, reserve pool, things like that. This is an actual screenshot I have taken while doing some performance testing of this particular database. You can see the database names here and the host of the database, the port, and the user which has connected to the database, and the pool size. This is basically the configuration which you have configured in Postgres, so pgbouncer.ini file. The transaction mode, the pool mode is the transaction, set to transaction. Also you can see how many current connections established to this server via PgBouncer. That all these information you can see here. So max connection 0 means there's no such max connection established here. Just the 0 means it's unlimited max connection from the PgBouncer perspective. Another admin command is you can show pools command, which basically displays some very valuable information about the pools, how the PgBouncer pool is performing, whether it is establishing enough connections, or whether you will get connection failures, things like that. So by using this information, you can troubleshoot your connection related information to PgBouncer. So this is a sample output I have taken while doing the performance testing of the application of show pools. So you can see here the CL underscore active is how many active connections are there for the server right now. It is 125. And SV underscore used, how many of them are currently used connections. So far it's 173. And also you can see the idle connection by looking at this one. Idle connection means the connection is just sitting in the pool, so whenever the connection is needed, that can be reused. Idle connection. So these are the things that you basically needs. Similarly, you can try other commands as well, like show lists, show users, show databases, show FDS, So you can see a little description of each and every command also. So these are really valuable information you want to gather from PgBouncer perspective. So these information are not accessible from Postgres server perspective because your clients are directly connecting to PgBouncer. Then PgBounce is the one which is managing the connection to the Postgres server. So that's why this admin console, PgBounce admin console is very important in order to troubleshoot issues. Another valuable piece of information is how to retrieve the PgBounce related logs. So you can use either journal CTL to retrieve this is actually the active currently streaming logs of PgBouncer. So if you are doing a performance test or something, you can just watch this PgBouncer log live like this using journal CTL command. So you also can look at the PgBouncer logs in var log folder. So right here you have the PgBouncer log. So you can look at this one as well. So this location is basically a configurable, attribute. So you can do this. You can change this location from PgBouncer ini file if you go to that. There's a parameter for the log file. So this is one of the errors that I have recently encountered when doing some performance testing of an application. So I saw from EDB Postgres server logs, I continuously see this one. So after some time, so login failed, fatal, remaining connection slots are reserved for non-replication super user connection. So which basically appears to be some connection related error, or it is limiting some kind of a ceiling, or it is from some the configuration perspective, it is limiting some connection to the database server. And if I look at the PgBounce logs, I also saw the pool error, and it says query wait timeout. So query wait timeout has exceeded, basically the default is 120 seconds, which is 2 minutes. And then after it's waiting for 2 minutes, it's basically closing the connection. So when I look at this attribute in pgbounce.ini file, so in query wait timeout explains maximum time queries are allowed to spend waiting for execution. If the query is not assigned to a user, the server, during that time, the client is disconnected. So basically, this query never got a chance to execute in the server. So it was waiting from the pool, PgBouncer pool, and it never got a chance to establish a connection with the server, and then waited for 2 minutes and then stop the connection. So in order to fix that error, I just increase the pool size to maybe, so you can increase couple of hundreds from the pool size. And also I changed the default pool mode to transaction, which essentially fix the error. So you just need to go through these documentations and see what each attribute means. And if you get an error, basically it gives enough information for you to troubleshoot. So you always refer the documentations, and refer, if you don't know the purpose of the attribute, you can get some idea by you going through the documentation, and then tweak those values and basically do some sort of another test and then you can again go to PgBouncer admin console and see how it establishing the connection, whether it is hitting any limitation, whether it is limiting the pool size or things like that. So it's kind of an exercise that you need to, perform in always doing performance testings. With the increasing number of users to database, these parameters needs to be revisit and then change accordingly. So that is continuous exercise that you need to do with your application. So that's all I have it for today. Thanks for watching the video and see you next time.